This is the world's busiest shipping lane, the English Channel, and tomorrow we'll be crossing it in a 34-foot yacht. Before we go, there's still plenty to be done on our Sharpie, the boat I've been restoring over the summer. All the planking has been caulked and stopped up, so the next job is to get some paint on her. This is the bit we're looking forward to, is finally putting some paint on. After all that structural work, the deck and so on, caulking the bottom, now it's nice to get some paint on. It's a nice easy bit, and with not a lot of effort the boat starts to look much better far more quickly. Just see the sun peeping over the trees here and the little hills, little kangaroos hopping around. And this primer is metallic wood primer. We've thinned it so it soaks well into the wood, so it should provide a good base, a good key for all the subsequent coats over the top. So after this, we're going to put a few more coats on top, then we can turn her over and start to finish off the inside. Then we're very, very close to finally going for a sail, which is, at the end of the day, what this is all about. We've given the boat 4 coats of primer with less than 3 days between coats. This ensures the layers chemically bond, forming a solid base for subsequent coats. We then put on 3 layers of undercoat, wait for them to fully dry before wet sanding them with fine paper. The top coat finish is only as good as the surface it's put onto, so this is very important. Barnaby, my apprentice, is wearing this protective suit to prevent the fibres from his clothes settling in the paint. This yellow is our top coat, so as a transitional layer between it and the undercoat, we're mixing the two together. This helps take the paint towards the final colour. Finally, on with 2 coats of top coat, wet sanding between each to give us our final finish. We'll only apply this and the undercoat to the top sides. To the bottom, we'll apply anti-fouling, a protective paint that prevents the build-up of weed and barnacles on the hull. It finally feels like we're getting there with our Sharpie. Now all the preparations are done, we can load up our gear for the trip. Don't worry, we're not crossing the channel in this dinghy. Our boat, Charity, is moored offshore, so the first job is to get out to her. Oh, the food. We're loading up for our cross-channel trip. Duty-free run, or the booze cruise as it's known. We've got enough food here for about 2 weeks by the looks of things. Clothes for every type of weather. Oh, there we are. It's about time we got there. It's just getting a bit nippy. Get this lot down below. Get the kettle on. The plan is to sleep on Charity on the mooring tonight and then set off for France at the crack of dawn tomorrow morning. Thank you. We're on Charity. She's a lovely boat. She's built 90 years ago. It's her 90th birthday this year, and this weekend we're hopping across the channel for a bit of duty free and hopefully a good meal. Now there's 4 of us on board, 2 people you haven't seen before. Stuart behind the camera. Hello Stuart. Mike down here, who produces, and Ian, who of course owns the boat. Got all the gear on board, food's down below, we've stowed the stuff, so there's a serious evening ahead of cooking a nice big pizza, which Ian's doing now, having a couple of beers and getting a nice early night, because tomorrow we're going to go across to Cherbourg. Now that's about a 13-hour trip, so we need to leave nice and early so that we get there in time before the pub shut. You ready, Ian? Yep. At 5 AM the next morning we got up, and before breakfast dropped the mooring and set off on our voyage. The steaming light ensures that we are visible to any other boats in this half light. It's about 5:30 in the morning, we're just leaving Chichester harbour. Sun's going to come up over there with a bit of luck. There's not a lot of wind so far, so we might have to do a fair bit of motoring, but never mind, whole day ahead. Still a bit early though, especially I didn't sleep that much last night because somebody was snoring and I ended up on deck sleeping outside, which actually was very nice because the stars were out and it was lovely. Ian is getting breakfast on the go before we enter the main channel, at which point it'll be all hands on deck. Even though it's early in the morning, you've got to be fairly switched on. Remember that all the buoyage and the marker posts are all the wrong way round because they're done for coming into the harbour and we're going out. So this port hand mark we're leaving to starboard. That starboard hand mark, we're leaving to port. So it's all back to front. Oh, lovely job, lovely. Thank you, Ian. I'll have one of those, if you don't mind. This must be early, as we've left before the fishermen have set out for their day's catch. That's Chichester Bar Beacon, complete with its resident cormorant, and that's our last marker before we get to France. Now we're out of the protective harbour, the wind is blowing a force 5, and it's time for some sails. That's the jib out, now we're going to put the staysail out. We've left the marker buoys behind, so now we need to plot our own course. It's over 70 miles to Cherbourg, so the first job is to set up a device to measure the distance we've travelled. Oh, thank you. Now this is the log. Although Charity's got an electronic log, we're going to put out this lovely walker log. This is a traditional trailing log with its impeller and a little gauge to read off the amount of miles that we travel through the water. There's two main components. One is the impeller, that goes over the side and gets spun by the water. That spins the whole rope up and connects to this gauge here. You can see the dial on the end, number of miles. So we can also work out our speed as well. If we time ourselves over 1 minute or over 1 hour, we know how fast we're going. This has got its own special little mount on each side. Isn't that lovely? You got that line ready, Ian?
Yeah, it's ready.
Yeah, okay. There's one thing here. When you pay out a line, it's a good idea, especially in this case where you've got a spinner on the end, to pay the whole line out in a bite. Then the last thing we'll do is throw the spinner in. If we did it the other way round, put the spinner in first, we'd end up with a complete handful of knots.
Okay, spinner.
Lovely.
Ready to go.
2, 3, go. Yeah, there it goes. Let's hope it's not eaten by a shark for breakfast. Now we must go and enter that on the log, the time that it went in, the log's on 0, and do a bit of chart work. Right, now this is our chart, and we're going to travel, hopefully, from Chichester here, across to Cherbourg here. Now on the way across, we have to get across 2 shipping lanes. You can see the shipping lanes over here in the purple, and I've drawn them in here so we can see where they are as we come across. Now, it's just a bit like the motorway. We're going to try and walk across the motorway without getting run over, and the shipping here goes from east to west, then there's a central separation zone, then they go from west to east. So we'll be looking out for ships as we go across. Now the other thing to bear in mind is that throughout the 12 hours it takes us to get across, the tide will be going 6 hours one way, and then 6 hours the other. So we have to take that into account when we plot our course to steer. Now luckily for us, Charity will hopefully bowl along at about 5.5 knots. The distance between Chichester and Cherbourg is about 70 miles, so that should take us about 12 hours, and that's accurate enough. The great thing about taking 12 hours is it's 2 tides. So the first 6 hours the tide will take us one way, and the second 6 hours the tide will take us the other. So they'll almost cancel each other out. Therefore we can pretty much plot the course to steer, which is 205 degrees, and go straight down that line. Because we've got quite a long way to go, it's a bit dull steering all the time, so we're going to call upon our 5th crew member, who you haven't seen yet. Do you have our 5th crew member in? Here we go. Here's our 5th crew member. It's called George. And this is the autopilot, or self-steering. That goes in there like that. That goes in there like that. That goes on there, and then we're straight down to here. Right, we go auto, and we dial in the course we want. That's it, and we're off. So far, so good. But what if something should go wrong? And before you go afloat, whether it be at sea, on a river, on a lake, it's very important to tell somebody where you're going. Now out at here, we can't really call for help because there's no one around. We can't see land on either side. But what we do have is a VHF. And this particular VHF is a DSC VHF. Now DSC stands for Digital Selective Calling. And this means that if the terrible thing should happen, if we should get squashed by a tanker, then there's an emergency button we can press here. Now the GPS within the VHF, the GPS is a global positioning system. It knows the latitude and longitude of exactly where we are. It'll send a signal to the Coastguard saying there's a boat in distress. Not only is it here, but it'll also tell them the code of the boat, and on file they should have the details of the boat, knowing its colour, its type and its size, so they know what to look for. "24 hours a day, 7 days a week, the Coastguard here at Falmouth is monitoring Channel 16 on the VHF for distress signals in the North Atlantic. If a distress call is transmitted from a modern DSC VHF, the Coastguard will know immediately the position of the boat in trouble. If not, they'll ask for the information from the vessel before working out a rescue strategy." Are there any particular incidents going on today?
There's one incident in the southeast corner of our area of responsibility in the Bay of Biscay there. There's a yacht that's hit a whale and suffered engine and rudder damage, and he's heading up towards France now. We've had to put broadcasts out to the area via the satellite to get response from ships who might be able to offer assistance.
This point here shows the position of the Pinball Wizard, which is a yacht that's been hit by a whale. It's got rudder problems, engine problems too, so they're trying to find someone in the location to give them a hand to get back in. They're looking for a vessel in the area to assist them.
We can put satellite broadcasts out on distress priority into that area, put an area code around it with 200 mile radius.
Right.
Hello sir, what's your latest position? Okay, and what's the course you're on now? Okay sir, the French are sending a French warship to you, and we'll pass them this position, and when we have an ETA, I'll call you back with their ETA.
So, within the next couple of hours, the crew of Pinball Wizard, at least, should be safe. That was a situation known as a pan-pan. It was urgent, but not life-threatening. If there had been grave danger on board, and lives were at risk, this would have been a mayday. In which case, an emergency position indicating radio beacon, or EPIRB, can be invaluable. It will automatically transmit an emergency signal to the Coastguard, telling them of our location. Here we've got a great range of EPIRBs. Now you can see they come in all different shapes and sizes. In fact, the old ones were absolutely enormous. That's one of the old ones. Great big lump of the thing. Nowadays they're a bit smaller. Here's quite a good example. That's bolted to the side of the boat. In the event of the boat getting knocked down, getting rolled, the seawater activates it and it starts transmitting a signal to the satellite. If, however, it's time to get off, you squeeze that, take it with you, jump into the life raft. With a bit of luck, someone's going to be along to save you and take you home. Although it's not generally necessary to inform the Coastguard every time you go sailing, it's a good idea to register your boat with them under that CG66 scheme, as Jimmy Miller showed me. Can you see if Charity's on there?
Certainly, here we go. Charity should come up, it was in there. There we go.
That's the one, yeah, excellent.
And it's timber, 9 metres, 2 metres draft, cream in colour, red below the waterline. We've got VHF, GPS and an echo sound.
So, if we should get into distress and need rescuing, this is valuable information for the Coastguard. So, if someone's afloat and they have a problem and they contact you, what sort of information should they give you?
Well, from day one when you train in the Coast Guards, from the senior officers down, they tell you the golden rule is who, what, where, when. Who are you? What's your problem? Most important, where are you and when did it happen? For argument's sake, the type of vessel, who is it? Could be Charity. Where is it? On the way to France. What happened? We dismasted. When did it happen?
That's excellent. Well, let's hope we don't lose the mast. Now, something else you really must have is a nautical almanac. This particular almanac contains everything you need to know about tides, ports, tide streams, directions and tide times. It also contains everything you wanted to know but were afraid to ask, including how to give birth on board a ship, just in case you have to. We're now 3 hours into our journey across the Channel on Charity, and as far as we can see in all directions, there's nothing but water. Ian makes his trip across the Channel several times a year, but he's not only an experienced sailor, he also rebuilt Charity single-handedly over a period of 5 years.
Our objective was to have it that if the original owner had got back on the boat, he wouldn't really notice a great deal of difference, and she would sail the same today as she did 90 years ago.
So you obviously spent a huge amount of time rebuilding it. I mean, has the amount of time you've had sailing it repaid that?
It has, but the rebuild itself is enjoyable, so I don't think the rebuild is seen as lost time. It's a different sort of enjoyment, it's a different sort of challenge. It's also a very social thing. And that's how we made lots and lots of friends in the boatyard, you included.
Earlier on we were talking about cruising, and for me there are three sort of phases. The first section when you depart, the last section when you arrive at the new port, but the middle section, don't you find it a bit dull?
The leaving and the arriving is exciting, and being in a strange place by your own effort is very rewarding. The middle bit can be boring, but the middle bit is also where you're thrown totally on your own resources. We generate our own power, we've got our own electricity, we've got our own water, we do our own cooking. It's a little self-contained universe. And there's just something amazingly satisfying about that.
It's now 9:45 a.m. and time to plot another position on the chart to see how far we've got to go before we get to those dreaded shipping lanes. So that's where we are now at 9:45. We're about another 5 miles from the shipping lanes, which just gives me time for 40 winks. While I'm sleeping, Ian and Mike are on the helm, keeping watch. And by the time I woke up, we were well into the first shipping lane, and we had already passed several large tankers. The log says we've travelled 30 miles, getting on for halfway, which I confirmed with our GPS reading. It's 11:39 and the latest GPS position is 50 degrees 15 minute 0.459 north, which is about there, and 1 degree 24 minutes 0.2 west. So this is our position now at 11:39, and you can see this is our course and this is our actual track as the tide pushes us further down the channel. Now in the next 6 hours, hopefully, the tide will change, start to go towards the east, and we'll get swept back towards our destination as we come across the channel. It's now my turn on watch, and straight away there's a huge tanker to deal with. What we do, take a quick hand bearing of him, and then a few minutes later we'll take another bearing and see how the bearing changes. That's about 160. So we'll give them a few minutes and see if it changes. So I'll take another bearing now. That's reduced by about 5 degrees. So if the bearing had stayed the same, then both ships will be on a collision course. We'll be in for a soaking. As it is, the bearing's reducing, therefore that one's going to pass well ahead of us. There you go, that's one pass. Now we just have to look out for the next one. Several others passed safely, but now there's one on the horizon that's given me real cause for concern. We've taken a bearing on it with a hand bearing compass, and it is increasing slightly, which means that we're going to pass ahead of it, but it's still a little bit too close really, so we may well put the engine on just to sprint ahead of it. What do you reckon?
We've got two choices. We can start the engine.
250. This is getting too close for comfort, and the only way to safely avoid the tanker is to put the engine on and speed our way out of its path.
And you can see the bow structure moving against the bridge. We're about a mile away now.
Even though it's that far away, you don't mess around. You just get well clear of him. He's doing about 25-30 knots. There are old pilots and there are bold pilots, but there are no bold pilots.
Coastguard has changed to a bearing of 265.
That was a fair bit of excitement. It all happens very quickly, even though you're dealing with a relatively slow-moving tanker and a relatively slow-moving boat. It doesn't take long before you've seen it, and it goes past you, so you really can't afford to mess around. But that's really as close as you want to get. Anything closer than that, really, and you're pushing your luck. So now we just look out for the next one. By midday, we were through the first shipping lane, so we could relax for a while. It's not all serious sailing, rope pulling, navigation, you know. It's time for a bit of serious eating too. And now we're having to put on lunch because the wind's dropped off. And it's easier to do it now than when the boat's heeling and bumping around, so we're going for it. It's good to keep body and mind and soul together. Like that, thank you. So are you going to stand up there all day, Stuart, or are you going to come and feed the camera?
Come down and have some lunch.
The other shipping lane came and went, and at 4:30 I'm plotting another position on the chart. We've made good progress, and as the tide has now changed direction, it's pushing us back onto our course. Hopefully waiting for France to appear somewhere. In that grey gloom over there, there's a little black stripe on the horizon. Right, it's just gone past 8 o'clock and you can see where we are now. Here's the entrance to the harbour, the east entrance, and we're heading this way. Now we've changed to a slightly larger chart, and again we can go on a better scale using our friend the almanac here, which gives us lots of information on arriving in the harbour. Now the two lights we're looking for is a green and a red, and for example this green here has a load of information written by it. It's an ISO, which is an isophase, and that's an equal number of light and dark timings, and it flashes 4 seconds on, 4 seconds off. It's on a pillar that's 19 metres high and then can be seen for 9 miles. So that also gives us an idea of when we see it, how close we are to it. Over here is information for the port hand mark as well. So the next job is to remember those two, get up on deck and look for those lights. Well, we're here, this is Cherbourg. It's 13 hours later and we're just coming in through the outer entrance. You can see there's one of the navigation marks on the left hand side. It's a red, it's port, it's flashing. That flashing we can check on the chart to check we're going in the right port. On the other side we've got a green, a starboard. It's still nice and warm. With a bit of luck the pubs are still open. We've done it. Excellent. Now we're coming in, it's almost too late. We ought to get the French courtesy ensign up. It's called a courtesy ensign because when you're a foreign boat in a foreign port, out of courtesy, you fly their ensign, a small version, on your starboard cross tree. So that's it, mission accomplished, and our meal will sure taste better now we've got here under our own steam.